effort. And with a little of that soldier attitude of getting things done, I look forward to welcoming you all back here in November 2020 to when we open this building and welcome 40 homeless veterans off the street to give them back a family, a community, and a home, and a place that they can call theirs. So, on behalf of the Board of Directors and the staff of the Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, I say with all my heart, thank you. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome Heather Mason-Wood to say a few words.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you all. I can speak on behalf of CANSO and say we're very honored to be here. At CANSO, we really believe in giving back, and we also really believe we owe a great deal of gratitude to our veterans. People who served our country to make it and continue to serve our country to make this a great place to live. And we at CANSO know that we're very fortunate. We have very secure jobs, we have homes, we have a lot of support, we know we're getting a paycheck every couple of weeks, and we know that not everybody has that fortune. And that's why we really like to give back. So when we heard that 10% of homeless people are veterans, we thought that is just astounding. That is terrible. Homelessness is a condition that no Canadian should face. Nobody, and particularly people who served our country. So we said, we have to be involved. So when John told us about it, and he said he and his family were doing it, and we said, yes, all the partners at CANSO said 100% we're behind this, and let's donate to this worthy cause. So we're very grateful that we had this opportunity, and I would like to commend Suzanne and all of her team for an excellent job of pulling together the funding, securing the land, and putting this project together. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Now I am very pleased. It is my great pleasure to welcome John Carswell to come speak on behalf of the Carswell family. Come on up.
We are just north of Beechwood Cemetery, where my grandfather, Sergeant James Morrison Carswell, Military Medal, was buried. And he went to war. September 1914, he signed up to the Toronto Motor Machine Gun Battalion, and he made it to France in time to be gassed by the Germans in the first gas attack in the Western Front. And he did 4 years, plus an extra year in the Army of Occupation, because he was an electrical engineering student, the son of a wealthy banker who decided to serve his country. And when you decide to serve your country, you don't really know what you're doing. And my dad will say that. My dad will say, you know, he'll admit to you that the principal said if you want to do war work, you have a choice. You can write your exams or you can go enlist. So he enlisted. And so to avoid his grade 12 exams, he enlisted. And he went off to war in 1941 when he turned 18 years old. And he flew the Lancaster bomber, was shot down on his 4th mission, which was above average. The highest serving crew on his squadron was 8 missions. You think of that. And when Suzanne talks about sacrifice, my dad wrote a book about his experiences, and his mid-upper gunner, Joe De Silva, was 30 years old with the family, and his parachute didn't open and he died. His navigator ended up freezing to death in the woods. So war was not a great thing for my father, because he ended up as a POW. He had escaped a couple of times. As he said, he was a guest of the Gestapo, and that wasn't very much fun either. But he survived the war, came home, met my mom, and went to architecture school at the University of Toronto. And then he decided he wanted to rejoin the Air Force. And he was posted here in Rockcliffe. And all you military people will understand what happened to him next. When he rejoined the Air Force, they found out they overpaid him and deducted his pay. Thank you, Canadian government. So my dad served many years, and he was an instructor at the staff college, the staff school in Toronto, where he taught all the Air Force officers who had just grade 12 how to read and write. And the Army officers and Navy officers will never believe that an Air Force officer can read and write, but that was my dad's job. And anytime we said, oh, I did good, he said, you didn't do good, religious ministers do good. Well, actually, we have a person in our crowd here, Suzanne Lee, who has done tremendous good. She is one heck of a person. She should go into politics, actually, after your speech. But Suzanne phoned me up, and I was educated by the Canadian government. I was trained by the Canadian government. I served as an Air Force navigator. My son is a serving officer with the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. That's kind of strange for a successful guy from the financial industry, but my son right now is at the Army Operations Staff College in Kingston. And he's been deployed, he'll be deployed again. And I know the feeling that Suzanne talks about when you have a son or a daughter who's being deployed. When it's you, it's easy. And when I was off doing search and rescue and we had a Hercules crash and my wife didn't know if I was alive or not, that wasn't easy for her either. It's not easy for families. And I was raised on Air Force bases. My friends are predominantly military. And the military sometimes doesn't end up well for people. And I've had a lot of friends that have had issues with different things like addiction and mental health. And so when I got the opportunity to participate in this, I thought it was a wonderful thing to do, because writing a check is easy. That's the easiest part of all this, and I get credit for it, which is not right. But when I heard that I could help homeless veterans, which probably there is no higher or more noble cause in this country, I said yes. So that's what I have to say. I'm given to long speeches on financial things, but on this subject, I'm going to be brief, and my colleagues are going to thank you for clapping now and cutting me off. So thank you.
Surprisingly, we are actually running a little ahead of schedule. So in a few minutes, we are expecting a PBY Canso jet to fly over for all of our pleasure and enjoyment. And I thought I would take a minute to talk a little bit about that PBY Canso jet. In the UK, we had them, we called them Catalinas. And my brother informed me as we were driving here that my grandfather flew in one. One of the many planes he flew over his career with the RAF. The interesting thing about Canso planes, as John alluded to, is that they were used for search and rescue. And during the war, they were used to actually land in the water, in the ocean, to rescue pilots who had been shot down over the English Channel in dogfights with the Nazis. So think about that for a second, what this plane represents. And it's important to us because the campus is named the plane. And I think, is it coming? Oh, it's still a ways away. It's coming. I'll stop talking and point when it comes over. But imagine being a soldier who had been, or a fighter pilot who's shot down. You're in the water in the English Channel. You're cold, and you're either going to die from freezing to death, you're going to die from starvation or thirst, or you're just going to drown. And this plane comes out of the sky and lands in the water, and you go from certain death to life. And that's what that plane represents. And we are so proud to have our campus named after a plane that did such important work, because we're dealing with veterans living on the streets who are they're drowning, they're facing certain death one way or another. The life on the streets is not a long one. You don't meet really old people on the streets, and there's a reason for that. So we're really happy about all of that, and we're very excited to have that name for our building. As soon as the plane flies over, we'll be inviting Andy Carswell to come up and say a few words. And so we'll wait for that, but I'll take this moment to thank the Canadian War Heritage Museum and John, who are arranging this flight. They own this plane, and the pilots, John McLagan and Mike Bella, who we can all meet later at the reception that's going to be taking place at the Aviation Museum, and as well as John Carswell and Heather Mason Wood, who did all the work of actually putting together this flyover. So, where's that plane? All right, so I had not planned on other people being so short speeched. We normally go over. The books. Oh, yes. The books. I will take a moment to mention the books. Canso and the Carswell family have been very graciously donated a number of books for us to sell to raise money for this project. They will be available for sale at the Aviation Museum at the reception, and we take cash, check, and even credit card. So a minimum donation of $20, and you can walk away with the story of Andy Carswell. I have read the book. It's very good. Well, I just said it. All right, where's the plane now? 3 minutes away. How about we take this moment to bring...
Tell them a bit about the Canso.
Okay, why don't you tell them a bit about the Canso?
Do you want a boring talk on investments, or do you want to hear about the Canso? Well, my dad flew Lancasters during the war, and as I said, 4th mission, he was above average being shot down, and after the war, he joined the RCAF here in Rockcliffe, and he flew the Canso. And the Canso is the Canadian variant of the Convair PBY Catalina. PB is patrol boat, Y means air if you're Navy. And so that was an ultra-modern airplane for the 1930s, first flew in 1933. By the time the war started, it was a little on the obsolete side. It couldn't really keep up with modern aircraft, but it was used by the British basically to win the Battle of the Atlantic, because the Americans built a whole bunch. And we started building them in Canadian Vickers in Montreal, the Canadair factory, which is now a Bombardier factory. And so the airplane that's going to fly over is actually a Canadian Canso. Straits of Catalina, Straits of Canso. And that's the background of the aircraft. So my dad flew the Canso on northern mapping. He was part of the first crew to go over the North Magnetic Pole. And they landed, and he did northern mapping all through the north. And then he was head of the flying boat school in Vancouver when I was born. And I thought he was a very brave man, because he was always doing these really, really brave things. But then I found out every time he went on a dangerous mission, he had kids at home in diapers, and he had 5 kids. So he was not all that brave. But for one of his missions, he was awarded the Air Force Cross by Queen Elizabeth. He rescued a person off a weather ship. In those days, you didn't have buoys, you had weather ships, and they just stay in place and get battered, and they were 1,000 miles off the coast of BC in open water, and you didn't land a amphibious aircraft in open water. So when I was little, my dad was my hero, and still is, but he flew the Canso, and my idea of being a great pilot was being able to land this airplane and throw out a fishing rod. And so the Canso is a very versatile aircraft. After the war, it was used by a lot of people to do a lot of different things, and it flew rescue work in Canada, and then it became water bombers all over the world. So if you want to look at a versatile thing to do and versatile aircraft, when I was looking for a name, I'm not big on naming things after myself, so we named our company Canso. And so when it flies over, you'll see somebody's pointing at the sky.
Yeah, people are pointing at
It's a bird, it's a plane. So it's powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney radial engines, and we've sponsored this Canso from Canadian Warplane Heritage, who flies Lancasters and Cansos. guys. You look up over that pole in that trailer. That's the most beautiful aircraft in the world, the BBY-5A Canso.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad.
It doesn't have that.